Well, welcome back to Two Dudes Talking Motorcycles. Except today it's just one dude. It's just me. Mitch is unfortunately feeling a little bit under the weather, so I decided to roll solo today. And yeah, y'all are stuck with me, so good luck. But today, what I wanted to talk about is my first drop. So the first time I dropped my motorcycle, and how it happened, and kind of how to get over it, because it did make me a little bit nervous doing certain things on it afterwards, but now I feel much more confident with my riding. It was nothing major, just a little scratch in the tank. I didn't get hurt, broken fairing, which was easily replaced, the beauty of plastic fairings. So nothing crazy. But I just wanted to kind of bring this up because this is something that probably every rider is going to experience at one point or another in their riding life. You're eventually going to drop your bike. It's not a matter of if, it's going to be when you drop it. Sometimes it might just happen in the parking lot. Sometimes it might happen on the off-road trail, like in my case, or anything like that. This was not a full-on crash. I have never been in a full-on crash, and hopefully I want to keep it that way. But it was a tip over, and it kind of sucked, but luckily I didn't get hurt. The bike wasn't hurt too bad, so we all came out okay. But before I jump into the main topic, I just wanted to cover a few new motorcycle announcements because it has been an incredible month for all of that kind of stuff. And I want to start with the most interesting one, and that's the Royal Enfield Himalayan. I'm a big fan of the Himalayan. That was one of the bikes I tested out before I even bought my very first Honda way back when. And I always thought it was a cool looking bike. It has a very classic, old school looking build and look to it. And it was kind of an old school built bike. I mean, the old bike was a single cylinder 411cc engine, and it was dreadfully slow. It had no power whatsoever. I can't imagine trying to ride that thing on American highways because our speed limits are very high and the bike is not very fast. However, I still think it looked pretty awesome. And I think this bike was really made popular by Itchy Boots because that was the first bike that she rode all the way from India back to the Netherlands. And that's kind of like where I got the idea, like, okay, well, if that bike can handle that, then surely it can handle me riding around Utah here and there. But yeah, it was a little too slow and a little too sluggish for me. But now they announced and are releasing a brand new and completely redesigned model, and some of the biggest updates that actually moved from a air-cooled engine to a water-cooled engine. It did get a bump in power from 411 cc's to 452 cc's. Got more power, so it's got 39.5 horsepower versus 24.3 that it had before. So it's a nice little bump. Probably still not enough for really tackling some of those higher speed roads, but it's still a welcome change, as well as 29.5 pound-feet of torque and a new clutch, 6-speed transmission versus 5-speed transmission. It's got ride-by-wire, so it does have riding modes now. It's got ABS standard. It's actually got Showa suspension on it, which I think is kind of cool, especially for a Himalayan. I mean, usually they're kind of try to stay more of a budget-friendly bike on the Royal Enfield, but that's pretty cool to see. I don't know what level of Showa it is. I'm assuming there's multiple, like, better or worse levels that Showa makes. I haven't looked into that, but that's still, I think that's still pretty cool. And it does save some weight. It has a new frame, so it's a little lighter frame. Still has tube wheels, which I think is fine, but you can get optional cross-spoke tubeless wheels, which I think is a nice option to have. You got better brakes, you got ABS, and I think the old one also had ABS, so it's not too much there. And the new headlamp and tail lamp, all LED. And what I really like, though, is the new dashboard that it basically has. It's kind of this round dash for the listeners. For those watching online, you can kind of see it. I'll pop it up in the corner there, and it's all a screen, but it looks in a way that it looks like an old school dash, basically. It's got the tachometer, the speedometer, but it's also customizable. I was watching the newest Itchy Boots episode episodes, and she was actually riding the pre-release version of this bike, and I noticed that on the screen she had maps up. Reading about it though, they did partner, like they're using Google software to basically display maps on that screen. So I think that's a really cool thing to see, and I would really love to see more manufacturers incorporate stuff like that, where you can, I know I've talked about, Apple CarPlay or Google Android being available on those big giant TFTs that a lot of bikes have. But I think even for a smaller screen, Royal Enfield did a fantastic job here, kind of, bringing some modern touches, but keeping this old school style round dial look, but basically making it a screen, which, yeah, props to Royal Enfield for doing that. And like I said, liquid cooled engine now. The bike's silhouette looks a little bit sleeker, a little bit more modern, less blocky than it used to be, which, yeah, I think their little Enfield, honestly, I think I have a little soft spot for retro looking bikes like that. I ride a Triumph Tiger, but I'm a huge fan of Mitch's Scrambler 1200 because it has that beautiful, beautiful classic look to it. And I absolutely love that. And it's awesome to see manufacturers still kind of preserving that kind of classic looking character on bikes. But yeah, I think it's a great little bike. I think, especially with these new upgrades, if it does come to the US market, which I'm assuming it's going to eventually. For now, they haven't announced officially whether it is or not, but it'll make its way over here. But I think it's a great little starter bike because the price point is generally pretty low. And if you want like something to get started on adventure motorcycling, it's kind of a good bike to go. But it does lack power. So if you are planning on riding long stretches of American highways, if you're here in the States, I don't know how well it's going to pull those. Here in Utah, we have lots of mountains. It's probably going to be a little bit more sluggish crawling up the mountains. But still, I think is be a fun little starter bike. And if you live in a country that has lower speed limits or has plenty of smaller roads to drive or ride over, well, yeah, that's another option to consider because it is coming to the UK before it gets here to the States. And then for other bike news, so Triumph, they updated a little bit on my beloved Tiger 900. So for the 2024 model, they bumped up the power from 93 horsepower to 106. So you're getting a little bit more power, you're getting a bit more torque. A lot of the stuff, however, remains the same. They did remove a couple of the models. They removed the base Tiger 900, and they removed, was it the 850? I think it was the 900. They removed the base Tiger 900, and they removed the Rally, which is the one that I have, basically because people weren't buying that. They were just upgrading to the Pro. And sometimes I kind of wish I would have just held out and waited a little longer for the Pros to become available, but the wait time for those was very long here in Utah. So I just bit the bullet and bought the Rally. Not much of a difference in performance between the two. The Pro just comes with a couple of extra riding modes and more of the accessories already included. But basically, most of the electronics and everything like that between the two are staying the same. The GT model and the GT Pro, they get the Versace monoshock in the back, and on the GT Pro, it's actually electronically adjustable, so for preload and things like that. The GT has always been more of the touring line, on-road touring, and the Rally obviously was the more off-road version. However, the suspension and everything like that remains the same. They, pretty much. And they did change up the fuel tank a little bit. So the fuel tank, the shape of the fuel tank is a little bit different. So it's actually a little bit larger than the model that I have, which is a pretty welcome change. I think for an adventure bike, a larger gas tank is, it's a great option to have, and it's a great feature because, you don't want to be stopping and planning your fuel stops every, as frequently, basically, as you would with a smaller tank. However, you do get the addition of adding a little bit of extra weight because of that. Beyond that, it's pretty much a very similar setup as to what we have now. Like I said, a little bit more power, a little bit more torque. They also added a bit of kind of like rubber bumpers on the handlebars to kind of reduce the vibration, because that Triumph, the T-Plank crank engines are kind of known for their, they're being a little vibey. So they kind of tried to address that a little bit, and don't know if they did. Hopefully it works. Service intervals remain the same. The biggest thing though is even though it has more power, it does have increased fuel economy. So it's about 10 miles per gallon extra, which I think is pretty impressive to get more power and get better fuel economy. I know it's a motorcycle. Most of us probably don't care about fuel economy, but it's still welcome. You know, it means you can go further without fill-ups, especially with the larger tank. Not bad. And last but not least, for BMW, we also have, and I'm sure there was a couple of more announcements that I'm missing. I'm just, a short little time for a news segment. They released their new S1000 XR, which I just kind of caught my eye just because I thought it was a very cool looking bike. It is kind of their sport tour bike, so meant to go long distances and pretty fast. It's their almost like a multi-strada equivalent if you compare it to Ducati. 107 horsepower, 84 pound-feet of torque. They also have the M1000XR, which has a whopping 201 horsepower, and that's kind of basically like an even sportier sport tourer. And I think it is a very, very cool looking bike. It's got all the standard BMW features that you'd expect. Their new headlights, their keyless ride, a bunch of different riding modes, and all sorts of different features. 999cc engine, dynamic traction, dynamic brake, kind of basically everything you would expect from a bike of this caliber. Various packages, heated grips, nothing on the heated seats. So, yeah, very cool stuff. TFT, no Apple CarPlay, very disappointing. But yeah, I think that's the roundup of the news, and I guess I'll get into my topic today, which was my first fall. So here's how it happened. I decided to go do a little bit of off-roading, practice that a little bit. Took my bike up to the northern part of the state, near an area called Bear Lake here in Utah. There's a bunch of trails that go through the mountains, and I try to take this off-road trail that basically, starts on the road to Bear Lake and then kind of drops me off basically in the middle of it, almost to the Idaho border. So I was riding along there. Everything was going fine. I was handling it fine. I was going nice and slow at a steady pace. Then I came upon this hill. This hill was, I know, to me it seemed pretty steep. However, depends on your riding level, your skill level. It might not be as steep as I pictured. It might not be steep for you. For me, it was steep. And I was feeling pretty confident up until that point. But that hill, on one side, it was kind of a drop off. On the other side, it was, just a slope. So I kind of tried to stay close to that side. But at the bottom of the hill, it went into a corner, a pretty sharp turn over to the right. And I guess what happened is I got a little too nervous about kind of hitting that corner. I wasn't quite confident enough in myself to, just let the bike do its thing, lead it into the corner, counterbalance it, stand up on the pegs, and just ride it out in first gear, let it slow itself down. And I was trying to inch my way down this hill, and unfortunately, I pretty much kind of hit my brakes a little too hard, got the bike to a standstill, and basically just tipped over. I fell on some rocks and some shrubs and some dirt. Nothing crazy. Tipped over to the slope side of the little trail. So it wasn't even a full tip over. Yeah, that's it. That sucked. However, and if you follow us on Instagram, I'll post a video of my little tumble. So, and that's at tdtmotorcycles on Instagram. Yes. Anyways, tumbled over and then it just happened. I just kind of accepted it. There's a few swear words being thrown around, and yeah, then I tried to shimmy my leg out from underneath the bike. Luckily, I was wearing all my proper gear. My boots held up very well. Props to TCX for making some good dirt touring adventure boots. Got my foot out from under the bike, lifted the thing back up, took a little bit of effort, but not too bad, and then proceeded to slowly inch my way back down towards the mountain because there's no way I was going to turn around on this road. But kind of kept doing what I was doing. I think I picked up a little bit more speed after that fall, after realizing what happened, and just continued on. Luckily, this is not like super in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it was still probably not the smartest thing to do to kind of just be out there by myself, especially not being the most experienced person off-road. But it was also a trail that I've seen several motorcyclists go by, several side-by-sides and off-roaders as well. So even if something were to happen, I think someone would have come along within a few minutes. And they did. After I got down the hill and found a spot to kind of stop, check the bike out, make sure there was nothing serious that has happened to it. Guy on the KTM came blazing down the hill. Boom. Sped off right past me. Not a care in the world. You know, props to him. I want to ride like that one day, and I'll get there. It'll just take a minute. Yeah, and like I said at the beginning, I had a little bit of a dent and scratch on my fuel tank, and one of my fairings broke, as well as my hand guard, because the Triumph just comes with a standard plastic hand guard. So, yeah, no major damage. Engine was fine. Tiny little scratch on the paint. That's about it. Nothing crazy. So I rode home, got home, examined everything again, make sure nothing was leaking. The oil was fine. Everything was good. Bike is fine. Ordered a new fairing, replaced it. And then a couple of weeks later, I decided to, go on a much easier and simpler little dirt road. And I noticed myself kind of hesitating a lot more going into the corners, especially if they're downhill and into a turn, because I just keep remembering about the little tip over. And sometimes it still happens when I do it. So it took me a minute to kind of get over going through it. But before I go into that, I'm going to talk about what you should do if the bike tips over. And I'm pretty sure everyone has their own version of advice. This is just kind of what I did. Fell over, made sure I was okay first, made sure the bike was, immediately turn it off if it's still running, kind of go all through all the steps. My foot was kind of wedged underneath the bike, but, proper gear. We're big advocates of proper riding gear here on the podcast. And I shimmied my foot out, lifted the bike up, double checked to make sure nothing was leaking, nothing was going on. Checked myself as well before even the bike, make sure I didn't, feel any pain on my arm. My armor and my jacket just kind of, and it was a pretty light fall, so I didn't get hurt at all. I've had worse falls snowboarding or mountain biking and things like that, or just, general clumsiness once in a while. So I was perfectly fine. My leg was fine. All of that was fine. And luckily the bike was also fine. It started right back up. I was able to ride it down the hill. Then after I stopped again, I double checked to make sure that, I found a better spot to stop kind of after riding it for a little bit. Checked to make sure there was no leaks, to make sure there was no damage to any of the essential components like suspension, brakes, anything like that. And it was still fine. Everything was good. Just, some cosmetic damage here and there. Not a problem. Easy fix. And yeah, that's pretty much all I did after tipping the bike over. And I think that's pretty much the advice that I would have for someone that if you happen to drop your bike or tip over for anywhere, whether it's on a dirt road or a parking lot or practicing something or anything like that, just check to make sure there's no structural or mechanical damage to it. Fairings and scratches, they can be touched up, they can be replaced. That's not a problem. But if your engine is cracked or if something's going on, if your brake is bent, if your brake lever is broken, the hose popped out, or got pinched or ripped or anything like that, you definitely might not want to ride that bike back, and call for a tow if you can, or just kind of figure it out. Basically make sure it's still safe to ride. Safety is important. You come first. The bike can always be fixed up much easier than your body. So if you don't think your bike is in rideable condition, best not to get back on it and keep riding it, especially if you're far from home. It sucks, but I think it's the better way to go. And so that brings us to kind of getting over. This is probably going to be a much shorter episode because, it's just me talking, and I don't know if you want to handle that or keep up with it for the entire 50 minutes to an hour that we usually do, so I'll keep it a little bit shorter. But ever since that happened, I kind of was a little bit, I kind of lost a little bit of confidence, especially going around smaller dirt roads, or going on smaller dirt roads, especially going into like downhill corners and things like that. And that's where I kind of like decided, okay, here's what we're going to do. I am by no means an expert off-roader. I'm by no means an expert, like, not even an expert on-roader. I feel like, I do fine, but, there's definitely lots of better riders out there than me. But, it's an adventure bike. I do want to take it off-road. It sucks that it got scratched, but for an adventure bike, I'm kind of expecting that to happen again in the future. There's probably going to be another time where I drop it, whether it's like on some kind of trail. But before I do take it out for any serious off-roading, I decided to take a step back a little bit from it. Still do some lighter things in here and there, nothing crazy, but I wanted to get some protection for it. So I got the crash bars, I'm going to get the sump guard, I got bark busters, I got kind of all this stuff to, make sure that if it falls over again, it's got a lot more protection to protect the vital components, as well as probably keep the tank off the ground a little bit better and things like that, so it doesn't scratch any more than it already has. And that's the benefit of the Tiger Rally Pro, is that it comes with a lot of that stuff already pre-installed. My bike does not. And if you are planning on taking your bike off-roading, I mean, if it's a really cheap $2,000 little dual sport dirt bike, I probably wouldn't care if I dropped that too much. I would buy it just to drop it as many times as I can, just to learn. But when it's a big adventure bike, it stings quite a bit more when you drop it, because, yeah, it's an expensive bike. But if you have an adventure bike and you do want to take it off-roading, I would probably recommend getting protection for it, at least engine guards and a sump guard, so you keep that engine safe, keep it protected, and in case you do drop it, it doesn't hurt any. It helps prevent the damage from any major or critical component of the bike. So that's what I decided to do. Decided to kind of up the protection on it, and then next year, we are in the fall now, so next year I'm going to try and do more off-road trails and kind of really, hit it a little bit harder and kind of gain that confidence back, because, every time I come into especially a downhill corner, I kind of just imagine that little tumble, and I have to remind myself to not slow down. I got to remind myself to just let the bike do its thing. The bike wants to stay upright. The bike wants to go, stay on the two wheels. As long as it's moving, it will do that. And the biggest thing to off-roading is, and this is from my personal experience, but also from I've learned and people I talk to, stuff, is you got to just kind of let the bike do its thing. It's going to be doing, stay relaxed, don't white knuckle it, don't try to fight where it's, where the front wheel is balancing. Just kind of let it go, let it do its thing. Don't try to fight it. And coming into a corner, you stand on the pegs, you counter, the bike's leaning to one side, you're leaning to the other side, things like that. And I kept trying to practice those techniques. I try to practice them in the parking lot at slower speeds. I try to practice them just when I'm like pulling in and out of my neighborhood, to kind of just get the idea, to kind of feel the bike and see how it would feel riding at those low speeds. And I try to do it as well in some very simple, nothing crazy, very simple dirt roads that are just off like the main paved road and things like that. So just in case something were to happen, I don't have to trek as far or ride as far, like a broken fairing again. And so kind of practicing the little things. But ultimately, I think what I want to do is try and find an off-road class, whether they have their own rentals that I can borrow, which would be ideal, or I have to bring my own bike and just kind of be very careful with it, because I would prefer someone that is very experienced to teach me how to also ride off-road versus trying to teach it myself. I tried teaching myself it, and I kind of got the basics down. I'm not scared of riding off-road, but I don't feel as confident as I would like to be riding off-road. And so I'm slowly trying to take steps to kind of, make myself better at it. And if that involves paying for training, paying for coaching to, learn from someone who's been doing it for a long time, I think that's a great way, at least for me, to go. Some people learn better by themselves. Maybe you have a cheap bike that you're not afraid of thrashing around and dropping. By all means, go ahead. It's your money. You spend it however you like. This just kind of my plan. Luckily, that tumble did not really affect my confidence on road. I still feel pretty confident riding my bike on road. I'm not a fast riding person. I don't try to do anything crazy, try to really lean into the corners, just standard riding up in the mountains, up in the twisties and things like that. Nothing insane. But the off-roading, it did kind of sting a little bit. And every time I see a corner coming up on the dirt road, I kind of imagine what happened and constantly have to remind myself, don't slow down, let the bike do its thing, counter lean, do all that stuff. So I guess my ultimate advice is that it sucks to drop your bike. And if it happened on something like what happened with me on the dirt road, it can kind of hurt your confidence in riding a little bit. Some of the most common tip overs happen on slow speed maneuvers. They're not tip overs they're not likely to seriously hurt you or the bike, but it really does suck, especially if it's a newer bike, to trying to like pull into your driveway or pull out of a parking lot and you slow down a little too much and you tip it over. You forget to put the kickstand down and you tip it over and drop it, or just something happens and it falls, and you can really kind of mess with you, because at least for me, I felt a lot more reserved in those similar kind of situations on dirt roads after my drop. And it's taking its time to kind of get back out of it. And I haven't ridden as much off-road as I wanted to this year because of it. And it was just kind of decided to get myself set up for better protection on the bike and try to take things a little bit slower than I did before, simply because I don't want to break the bike. It's an expensive bike. I don't want it to break like the engine, suspension, or any of the critical components. Fairing scratches, that's fine. Those are going to happen regardless, because I'm probably going to drop it again. But, I want to get much better at riding off-road so I can minimize the amount of damage or things that could happen to the bike. Yeah. I think that's kind of it. It's a little bit of a shorter episode, but dropping your bike is not fun. Dropping your bike while you're on it is also not fun, and can hurt, and it can really kind of hurt your confidence. But we just kind of get back up and start riding. And luckily I had my GoPro running. I could kind of see, or I watched the footage over and over and over to see where I did wrong, what I did wrong. And basically the conclusion was that I was going way too slow. And, if a bike is going slow, it doesn't want to stay upright. It just wants to lie down, take a little nap. And that's pretty much what happened with me. It was a learning experience, and I learned a lot. I learned how to lift the bike back up off the ground. I learned the additional things the additional accessories that I want to get for it to keep it from being, to minimize the amount of damage it gets the next time I drop it. And also that it made me realize that I bit off way more I could chew riding that kind of trail, and I need to become way more skilled at riding off-road than I have been before. Basically, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit, and I think I think if you're a new rider, this is something that will happen eventually. Eventually, you will drop your bike one way or another. Hopefully, it's nothing crazy, and hopefully no major damage happens, but it really does sting. But the best thing you can do is just, get back up, figure out what went wrong, and, try to take steps to keep it from happening again, because that's the lesson learned. And, the best way some of us learn is by doing. But definitely don't keep it from riding. Definitely don't keep it from riding your bike. The only way you can get better at riding is by riding. And if you're really feeling unconfident, take an advanced motorcycle safety course, take an advanced riding course. If you have a buddy or someone that's an experienced rider, have them kind of coach you or watch you ride, and tell you where you can be improved. Be open to learning new things, be open to criticism, be open to I think that's pretty much it. I'm getting too inspirational here. Basically, be open to all that kind of stuff, and keep on riding. It sucks that it happened, but it's definitely not something that should keep you from riding in the future, unless it was something really bad, or you're just like, nope, this isn't for me. I'm done. I'm completely done. But if you enjoy your motorcycle, and if you're a rider, if you're an experienced rider, chances are you probably dropped your bike before. If you're a new rider, there's a high chance that you're probably going to drop it sometime in the future if you haven't already. It happens to pretty much everyone. Nothing to cry home about, and you just pick it back up, figure out what went wrong, move on, and take steps to keep it from happening again. Anyways, I think I babbled by myself more than I would normally do. So thank you so much for listening. And just a couple of quick things before I wrap up here. We are Revzilla affiliates. If you are in need of new riding gear, or if you want to stock up for next season, feel free to use the link in our podcast description. We do get a little bit of a kickback from every purchase you make, which helps the podcast. We really want to try and grow this thing, get some better equipment and all that stuff. And also, we do have a Buy Me a Coffee. That's buymeacoffee.com/tdtmotorcycles, where you can buy us some coffee, buy us some gas for a ride, or what it'll really be used for is just trying to save up to upgrade equipment for the podcast so we can have better and better content. And also, feel free to, if you're watching this on YouTube, comment below if you're not crash, but your first drop stories, or if you are listening to this, feel free to email us at tdtmotorcycles@gmail.com. Share with us your stories of you dropping your bike, or how you got over or how you gain your confidence back after dropping your bike or having something like that happen. I would really like to know, because that was something I haven't really happened before. So to me, it was something new, and that's kind of how I dealt with it. So if you have any advice, and if you have any thing you want to share about that, feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear all of your stories. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. Sorry you just had to deal with me today. Hopefully Mitch is feeling better by next time we record, and we'll see you in the next episode. Have a good one.